And I would think he would think that I wasn't going to be able to mentally, make it through the work that I had to cut out, that I had cut out for myself, just because I didn't have that mental crutch in my nicotine. But now that seems not to be a problem anymore. So that's mentally, spiritually, especially in the place that we're in the world today, where people don't necessarily aren't religious or they cling on to religion too hard. I think that um, what you experience spiritually once you quit nicotine, I'm going to speak personally because that's what I know is my experience, the walk of life that I walked, and that is a lot of motivation, a lot of purpose, and a lot of reason were gained out of, when I quit nicotine. And I had been wondering, what had been up with my lack of motivation, my lack of purpose, my lack of ability, and spiritually, my lack of understanding as well. And I realized that after I did quit, I had this new path, new sense of spirituality, and this new spiritual system for myself. I also would say that you have to think about how you're the mind, the body, and the soul, right? So spiritually, you got to think about how the body is affecting the spirit, right? And how that's affecting the mind, right? So think about the actions that you take and how they affect, how the actions you take in your physical body, how that is affecting your soul and you at a spiritual level. Because these three facets were simultaneously connected, and right, so you have to think about that, and then you also have to think about how whatever you think about, your actions you take with your body, and then that is also a reality, that your thoughts, teamwork makes the dream work, and the more that you spin that, the more that you say that, the more that you speak it into existence, you will it into reality, and there's now power behind these things because the more people that put energy towards it, the more it's able to become a source. So I think that it's bad for people who are, spiritually lost, if they get into such things like this. Like I talked in my last video, spiritually, about why it's so addictive and why nicotine is such a highly used substance. I talked about that in there. But you gotta think about not only how your actions in your physical body are affecting your mental, but also how they're affecting your soul and how they're affecting your spirit. And that's just something to be aware of. As well as physically, you can notice a difference in the fact that without nicotine, your body is no longer dependent on a substance external from you to feel good, to feel comforted, to basically ease in at night, to de-stress, really to do any physical action, you're not dependent on nicotine anymore. So living without it is what you can expect from a life without nicotine, from a life free of addiction. Physically, you can also apply, your energy to things that are going to motivate you and that you'd rather be doing with your body, rather than being in a self-abusive relationship where you're doing something to feel good, but you're actually also damaging the body at the same time. And then that brings me back to the point that I was going to make before, which was spiritually don't fall in love or give spiritual power, spiritual strength to a version of yourself that is self-abusive version of yourself. Hence, aka an addiction, where you are partaking in an action that is harming yourself, yet you think that you're doing it for the right reason. So just make sure that you don't fall in love with an abusive version of yourself. And so back to physically, like I said, you're not going to have the dependence on nicotine. You're not going to need it to keep you going. You're not going to need it to make your body feel good. You can actually get a lot more natural highs than you'd expect, and you kind of don't feel this as much when you are hooked on nicotine physically, because it's just such a strong, potent substance that any time you do intake it, it kind of overrides any other experience that you may have in the physical realm. So that's what you can expect physically. Emotionally, Emotionally, a life without nicotine is, in my experience, a lot more balanced. It is one of having conviction, knowing how you feel, right? Having conviction in those feelings, knowing how you feel in real time. And this is kind of being in the moment, not only with our thoughts, but also not only with our physical body, but also with our emotions. I'd like to say that emotional strength, in my view, has been gained out of the experience when I experience a life without nicotine versus when I experience a life addicted to nicotine. And I think that's primarily because it's so addictive it becomes an emotional crutch in most scenarios. And it's hard to detach from an emotional crutch because it depends on how good this makes you feel. And in the case of nicotine, it makes you feel, outstandingly at first, until you realize that you're kind of in even an emotional abusive relationship with yourself, that you keep feeding this side of yourself, that it makes you feel falsely good. It makes you feel good, right, for a short amount of time, but at the same time it's bittersweet because it's going to wear off. And you also have the lack of guilt from relapse and the lack of guilt from use, which I experienced when I quit smoking nicotine, when I quit vaping nicotine, which was basically every time I did end up telling myself, okay, I am just gonna keep going, I will purchase another device. Anytime I told myself that, and then I went through on it, when I had intentions to quit and to stop using, I'd feel guilty, and then that was right away. And then throughout that use of that device, either whether it be a couple days later or a week later, when it's about to run out, whichever scenario it may be, then the emotional feelings of guilt of use as well as guilt of relapse, you don't have to deal with that anymore, right? And if you're going to be in a more present state emotionally, it's going to be better for you because you're going to be able to be more stable in your emotions and have more emotional conviction to know what you feel and know what you truly want for yourself. which really works for you in a broader basis of things. So that's going to be it for the 222 day check-in. Peace.